What are we looking forward to in 2024 when it comes to music? Are there any albums you're looking forward to? Are there any shows in 2024 you're looking forward to?
For me,
Yeah, I know the person behind you, Greg. Yeah, you.
shows I'm looking forward to.
Me
Trans-Canada
neither.
Highwayman. That'll be fun.
That's December, no?
Yeah, you're away for that though, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to be here. Here's what I'm looking forward to. I know it's like years, months away.
Sorry, I should have asked. What are you looking forward to?
Thank you very much. Thanks for asking. I'm looking forward to going to more shows at the CNE. That's what I'm looking forward to. I've
At
never
the band
done
show?
it. Yeah, I've never
You've
done it
never seen any bands at the band show?
except this year. Now, I maybe as a kid that I don't recall because it never
Yeah.
made an impact. But no, I never went, and I would always, in the Star or the Sun, you'd see all of these like now classic rock bands playing at the band show
Yeah.
all summer long. You know, yeah, and as a kid, I missed all of those. I for whatever reason. But now it's like, oh yeah, they still have those shows. I went to just one. Saw the Sheepdogs at the band shell, and that's all. We just went that night and just paid to get in to see the show. No, we stayed. We stayed that. We stayed a few hours afterwards, just hanging around. But yeah, I think I'm looking forward to that. Doing more of that sort of stuff.
Oh, it's always good shows there. I've seen when it comes to CNE, I've seen in the last few years. I mean, USS played, Men Without Hats, I think with Spoons.
Yeah.
I don't think who else I've seen there lately. Like over the last however many years, couple of years. Actually,
Yeah.
probably was probably pre-COVID. If you think about it.
Yeah.
So I probably haven't seen anybody since
Recently.
pre-COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. Again, who knows what life brings, but that's what I'm looking forward to. And that's the pre-show,
That is the pre-show.
or maybe it's not. Like it depends when you.
It's gonna
publish
be really, really interesting to cut that up.
this.
I'm not gonna lie.
Hi, it's Ray Robertson, author of All the Years Combined, The Grateful Dead in 50 Shows, and welcome to the music.
Welcome, 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 Ray. It's a pleasure to have you on the show with us. I want to start out with a discussion about it's a subtle theme. It's quite subtle throughout the book.
Okay.
As a couple of times that drugs are mentioned, very subtly, but
Just
there's
a few times.
once or twice, maybe something like that. I think one of the, and I'm going to paraphrase you, but I think you said something like "no drugs, no Grateful Dead." Like there was an equation to that. Let's kick it off with that. Like, can you talk about sort of the drug influence, the drug culture, and everything that had the influence on the Grateful Dead?
Well, there's good drugs and bad drugs, I think. And initially, I think the Dead were very interested in good drugs, exploratory drugs, psychedelic drugs, hallucinogenic. And remember that the Dead start off as like a R&B blues cover band. They're Pigpen's the guy, and they're learning their instruments, etc. But when they start taking acid, which of course is legal when they start taking it in California, it is till 1966, strange things start happening. Like, why would we stop playing if it's fun? Let's play for 35 minutes or so, Drugs do that. And also, I think those kind of drugs open you up to possibilities, to think beyond the music industry, for lack of a better example there. I think later on, when they become a touring band or working band, cocaine doesn't have such a good influence, but that would be disingenuous because some of my favorite shows are during the coke years, and you're not playing 3.5, 4, 5 hour shows the way they played them without those kinds of drugs. So like anything that's interesting, there's no right or wrong. There's no black, white. There's no left, right. There's no good, bad. It's very complicated. And that's one of the things that I wanted to do. I just did an interview and someone said, I love your book, The 50 Greatest Shows The Grateful Dead. Clearly they hadn't read it because it's not that. And I said, no, it was 50 shows telling the story. And I said, one of the things that kind of, they said, what did you learn from it? And I said, well, it was interesting how the society changed, the world changed, the rock business changed, and the drugs changed. And when your age changes, you just don't same. So drugs to me are not a bad thing. I think they're bad when they're misused. There was a saying in the Grateful Dead circles that, drugs aren't a problem until they're a problem. And I think that's really sort of the essence of it, But anyway. Yeah.
Was there a reason?
Yeah.
Is the number 50 symbolic at all?
No, initially I was going to do 100, and I thought no one's going to want to read that book. It's too long, because the concerts aren't that long. They're probably, the minimum's probably around 900. Some go live 1,400. But the way I write them, I think they're very dense, and I felt that 100 would be counteractive. I mean, when you start off writing a book, you kind of have a feeling about how long it is, but you really don't know until you're about 20, 25% of the way through. And I knew that 50 was a nice number in terms of, again, it's not the 50 greatest hits, the Grateful Dead. It's the story of the Dead. So kind of like a biographer, I would sort of say, okay, that show illustrates this, or this show has got this. And it kind of was like putting a puzzle together in a way. And 50 I felt was the right number. And then when I finished the book, you clearly have read it, so there's a bonus track, and the bonus track is a 51st show. Because that last show that the Dead do, the last show they played in Chicago in July of '95 is it's a downer. Not just because it's the last show, because frankly it's not very good music and it hadn't been for a while, etc. And I felt, wow, great, I'm done. Ooh, the book's done. And then I had this nagging sense that it wasn't right. And then the idea that I had was that go back to really at the height, the peak, like '74, when they're playing well, the wall is sound, they got their own record label, they're going to sell their own tickets to their fans, they have their own label. And so I kind of came back that way. So technically it's 51 shows, but 50 just seemed to feel like the book feels like the right power to weight ratio. I don't think it'd be a better book if it was 400 pages. I think it's a dip. You can dip into it, but if you wanted to read it from the beginning to end, I think that's the right density of it,
Yeah, it makes sense. And you brought it up, and one of the things I wanted to explore was that, you weave short stories, if you will, and that's one of the things I liked about it. It's short stories around each show or each gig, but you weave the short stories around each show around the band's timeline to tell that story. So, like, how did you get to that?
Well, I guess that was the challenge, because again, it's not just 50 shows. It's sort of like I glory in the music up to like 77. There's some of my greatest shows, and so there was a lot of superlatives, and a lot of it was just about how can I come up with fresh metaphors to explain how this music is so unlike contemporary music, so wonderful, blah blah blah. But then I felt that certain shows should capture what a drag it is to play at a hockey rink, what a drag it is to play at a football stadium. How it's not the same. The epigraph to the shows is from a show from February 13th, 1970, and Bob Weir. And that to me was the hallmark, what he said before the show started. This ain't a concert, it's a party. And I thought, yeah, you can't have a party with 65,000 people. It becomes what it is now. It's entertainment. You go, you pay, you entertain me, I'll buy the t-shirt, we'll go home, which is fine. But initially, it was more symbiotic. It was more, and I like that idea. And I think it's so antithetical to our time period, where you go, I paid my $200 and now entertain. And you better play the songs the way that we liked, too, and play in the right way. One of my favorite moments in the book was one of the shows from November '73. You guys probably remember it, when they're into the other one. It's a real dark, spacey kind of period. And then after about 8 minutes, Garcia pulls the plug and says, no, I want to play Eyes of the World instead. I love this samba, like, I don't feel like being in that place. It's flipping this place. And what a wonderfully amateurish thing to do, which I think artists need to remain to be. Don't be a professional, and they never returned to the other one. They just said, that wasn't something we were interested in tonight. And for a long time, it was like that. And I cherish that. And I think it's more than just like great tunes. I think it's more like a philosophy, almost a aesthetic philosophy, but also a philosophy of life, in the sense that we're Anyway, I'm rambling now, but yeah, I don't even remember the question.
No,
but that was the point.
yeah, totally. It's interesting you say that about playing what we want to hear versus
Right.
something else.
Well, it's a beat.
My uncle and I just went and saw Dylan at Massey Hall, and for me it was neat to see Dylan for my first time. I mean, I'd never seen Dylan before. For my uncle, who had seen him back in the '60s or '60s, early '70s, probably '60s, he was expecting something very different. He wanted those classic songs. He didn't get them. He wasn't overly happy about that, which I thought was kind of interesting. I don't know.
I did have a friend though who saw the same show and said they did play Stella Blue though. Dylan did play Stella Blue, so that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, I know it's very true. I mean, it's a very beatnik ethos. The idea is that, I mean, I make the case in the book the Dead weren't hippies; they were beatniks, especially when Garcia was in charge. And the idea is that if we're not having fun, then you won't either. And I think that's the same thing for books as well. I can pick up a book and know that if someone wrote it because it was a good idea, it will catch the zeitgeist, as opposed to someone wrote a book because they had to. Because if they didn't, it was going to, I wrote this book because I was driving everyone around me crazy because I was, oh, listen to this show, man, listen to this. And it's like, just go off and write your book. And I think that for a long time, that was a real part of the Dead ethos was, we're doing this because we want to, and by all means, come, support us so we can make a living out of it. But we're not doing what we're supposed to do. We're doing what we have to do, and I find that incredibly inspiring. After 15 books, you kind of have to think about why are you doing this, and you're doing it to make sense for yourself. To have a better, deeper understanding, say, of the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, Gregg will be probably the first to tell you that the whole purpose of this podcast is to get always one step closer to Neil Young. One step closer. So as I start reading your book,
for sure.
Yeah.
You talk about being a huge Neil Young fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many questions I can ask you about this, and maybe we'll stay on here because it really is supposed to be a Neil Young podcast, Ray. Is there a connection you think for you between your fandom of Neil Young and what came later in life for you?
Yeah, that's
your fandom of Jerry and the Grateful Dead.
That's a legitimate. I mean, it sounds very self-serving, but it's actually a good question. It's a really good question. Well, Neil Young, grew up. This is a different time period too. I grew up in a small town. Where are you guys in Windsor? Where are you based?
Toronto.
We're in Toronto.
Oh, you're in Toronto. Okay, same as me. You know where Windsor is. I grew up in a place called Chatham. Small town, pre-internet. Didn't have any cool older brothers or sisters. It was tough finding cool stuff. And then when I found Neil, it was revelatory. He was like the first, artist other than Dylan, but he was Canadian, so that was kind of cool. So albums like On the Beach and Tonight's the Night and Time Fades Away, when I was in grade 13, made me feel like, this wasn't on the radio. This was amazing stuff. It's interesting, though, that you say that because there's that element to the Dead, specifically Garcia, that is sort of, my favorite period is the sort of jazz-inspired period, 70, 75 or so. Every time that I bought the new Neil, the second anthology, not anthology, the 8 CD deal, whatever it is, and it's great. I listen to all these songs that I hadn't heard before or demos of them or whatever. But I find that as I get older, I can't return to them. Like I can't sit in my chair and listen to, 15 3-minute songs like I used to be able to. But I can sit in my chair and listen to Alice Coltrane for half an hour, or I can listen to Yusef Lateef, or I can listen to the Dead in 73 when they're the second sets. And I don't think it's better. I just think it's different because Neil Young to me was the barometer of integrity when I did, before I wanted to be a writer, when I was, whatever, just sort of like that guy's got his priorities right, and I think that's something that will always be important to me that way. Plus I'd had a lot of flannel clothes just like Neil. So that was changed my high school diploma, Now you can't be like 73, 74. I mean, Neil is the guy. I mean, there's no one else like playing songs. I mean, he's not, playing songs. There's really no one else like Neil Young, and I just have the greatest amount of respect for him. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially an original Crazy Horse too. Danny Whitten, such a genius. Yeah,
And
but that's it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's good. How do you like? Is it that that ethos that Neil? I'm going to make my music my way.
Yeah,
Was it that connected you? Like Jerry was similar in that he wasn't necessarily writing pop songs, but he wanted to be true to himself.
Yeah, well, as you saw from the book, I didn't really get into. I mean, I knew about the Dead. I had a couple albums, Working Man's Dead, American, because I was more of an alt country, progressive, whatever you want to call it, guy. So of course I knew those songs. But the epiphanistic moment came for me when I was actually listening to a Garcia solo album.
Yeah.
With Merle Sanders, the great Hammond B player, and I love Hammond B. And I picked up a rare record, $12. Oh, this is great! And I was listening to a song called "Like a Road," and it's a real small band. It's just Merle on Hammond B, 3 drummer, bass player, and Jerry. And I remember for the first time hearing the guitar solo, which to me were always about getting the solo over so we could get back to the song. In spite of Like a Hurricane or Down by the River, things like that. I never really got it. Like when jazz people would say, the way that Jerry talked about Coltrane, he would say, well, I've never copied any of his licks, but he's been influential. Well, how's that? He said, well, to me, when I heard him, it sounded like he was playing in paragraphs. He would say something that now I'm going to say this and say this. And how can you get that from an instrument? I'm a word guy. And I was sitting there and thinking, this song, I could listen to this song, of which about 8 minutes of it is guitar solo, again and again and again. And wow. And it keeps delivering things. And I could hear... And that's when I said, I've got to hear more Jerry Garcia. And so actually that's what led me to the Dead. It was more the solo stuff. And then when you get into the Dead and you hear Phil Lesh, I'd never heard a bass player who didn't bother to keep the bottom. Which was like, I have a friend, he's a real year zero punk rock guy. And we always, he always said, oh, Dead. And I finally got him to come around. I said, Tim, they're a shitty rock and roll band. I get it. He went, as long as you, I said, they're not trying to play rock and roll. And when they do, it's really not that great. I don't need to hear the Ned Do Promised Land or, Johnny B. Kidd. Phil Lesh never played the bass when he was asked to join the band. He was a classical musical nut and a jazz guy. And Garcia said, we think the same thoughts. I mean, and so you listen to the Dead, and I'm listening to it, and Lesh is more like a painter. He'll put a note here, a note here, a note there. There's no bottom. Like there's no bottom. And so it floats there. And so I can see as people say, this is really lousy music. It's really loud. And then you realize, no, they're making their own kind of music. Kind of like the way Neil would play those guitar solos with only 2 notes,
Yeah.
But yet they sound amazing. I mean, we were in the car the other day listening to Cinnamon Girl on Sirius Radio. She turn it up.
Yeah.
Again, making your music from your own limitations, the things that are in your head are wonderful. And again, I don't think those are just music lessons. I think those are life lessons, not trying to sound like other. In a world that is really insistent that we all look the same, sound the same, think the same, I think it's really refreshing that the Dead kind of exist in their own ecosystem outside for a long time, not forever. They were subsumed, and that's part of what the book's about. But for a long time, it was like, okay, we're gonna do what we want to do, and if you'd like to come along, that would be great. But we're not going to chase you. We're not going to make It's again, it's about. It sounds corny, but it's more like art. There's something that we have to do, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. But if you don't, there's other bands. There's other stuff for you to do, which I find really refreshing.
Yeah, and for sure. And it's funny because you talk about eventually being consumed or becoming part of the pop culture ethos, if you will, right? Like one of the things you talk about in the book that I wanted to ask you about was you mentioned, again, going to fast forward to the 90s,
right?
They were one of the top grossing bands in the 90s, and I remember one of those years, I believe the top was Dave Matthews, and it's like, how, like, I'd love to get your view on during that time, how were these bands that weren't necessarily, again, they had the number one hit, and Dave had some hits, but these bands were just massive when it came to
and they only got one top 10 hit, and that was with Touch of Grey, and it wasn't number one. I think it's because, and this is a good thing, and it's also a bad thing. Why again? I thought it was interesting to write about. I think it's simple. I don't, it's straightforward. I think people were attracted to the uncorporateness of it, the idea that we're going to hang out and and the dead by that point, I think, are coasting on their reputation. But the idea is still that these are sort of outsiders. And, you think of poor kids growing up during the Reagan years and things like that. It was probably very attractive. And I have friends, I thought with the book, yeah, the music, when we listen to stuff from the 70s, but we loved going to the shows because of the people and the welcomeness and the sense. Now that did change though. When it became, this is a great place to party. There's a lot of sex and there's a lot of drugs. You get people who aren't there for the music, which changes things a bit. And Garcia hated it, but he kept doing it. He kept saying how he didn't want to play stadiums. That they attracted people to get busted, and there's no vibe. But when you're 50 years old and you've got mortgages and you've got alimonies and you have kids in university and you have drug habits. Yeah, 65,000 people sounds like a good thing, not a bad thing anymore. So that to me is that tension between, because how much can you flirt with the mainstream without being subsumed by it? How much can you, how much can we get out of it without becoming part of it? And I think that was part of Garcia's depression, was that, I don't think that some of his best music, I didn't know the man, but from what I've heard is that his most fun he had was playing smaller places with David Grisman, just playing bluegrass or playing with his solo band. But even then, they were moving beyond theaters into small arenas. So how do you try to become less popular? It's an interesting question, right?
Oh wow.
True,
very true. As I'm reading the different concerts, I'm going to call them concerts, not chapters. But as I'm reading about the different concerts, I'm keeping in my head, okay, they recorded every show, archivists, and I'm thinking, okay, is there a band today, not necessarily young, that maybe is doing something similar? And all I could think of, again, they've been around for a while now, is Pearl Jam. They support their bootleg culture. They support their fans in this way. They love that their fans are doing this sort of stuff. From where you are, Ray, will there ever be another Grateful Dead?
Well, two questions. I mean, the other band I think of a lot is Chris Robinson has really embraced it. In fact, Betty Cantor Jackson, who's the saint of tapers, she actually tapes Chris Robinson shows now. But remember that the Dead did, like a lot of bands do it now for the reasons that you're saying. It says nobody's making money selling music anymore, so it is touring, so it's good to encourage it. The Dead, Owsley, the acid manufacturer and their first benefactor, he recorded the shows for really two reasons. Number one, so that he could hear how he was doing with the mixes, because he mixed the band. And secondly, because they were young and full of piss and vinegar. What do you do after a show? You go back to someone's room, you listen to the show. How could it be better next time? After about 71, when they're touring, it kind of became habit. You sort of record them or whatever. But initially, it wasn't seen as a pension plan or as anything other than this will make us sound better. We can have a better show. Yeah. But I think it's a wonderful idea now because, nobody's making money off music. You have to tour. And I think if you've got it now, if you're a band like the Eagles who plays the same songs the same way every time or something like that, then there's no real point to it. But if you listen to a show and go, wow, that night they decided to, do a 30-minute cover of something or something like that, I think it's like advertising in a way. But it sounds kind of crass, but it's very healthy. And I think it's breaking down that barrier again between the big corporate thing and who we are. We're all kind of in this together. And I really like that idea. Weir said that the Dead stood for misfit power, and I really like that. If you ever been to a Dead show or a Dead tribute show, and there are some good bands. There's one in Toronto that's going to be playing. Who's Got His Dead's playing at my lunch. People dance, and dancing to Dead's music can be really ugly. I mean, there's no bottom to it. It's a lot of just sort of, but it feels good. And guys like me who never danced before, because you're in a Neil Young dance in a Neil Young show. That's just not cool. Everybody's dancing and beautiful. And what I like too about these shows too is that you'll have young people, and you'll have people who are in their 60s, older than me, who were there because they've been to shows. It's more like not religious, but it's almost like it's a ceremony appreciating the whole experience, and I think that's really cool. It's okay to be an outsider in the Dead's world, and I think that's really attractive. You know, it's not. It's kind of cool now because they're nostalgia, but I think there's something about that misfit power that's really attractive. Yeah.
So as we near the end of this, Ray, and by the way, thank you so much again for joining us. The book, before I forget, is All the Years Combined: The Grateful Dead in 50 Shows. Our guest has been Ray Robertson. Ray, I'll be the first to admit, "Touch of Grey" is my Grateful Dead song. I just love. I will. That's one song guaranteed that if I ever hear it on the radio, if it ever comes on a playlist,
right.
I'm cranking it up. There's just something fun about
it's more
that
it's
song.
It's a like racist song that's just so affirmative. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. But for people like me and others who have heard about the legend of the Dead, they've heard Deadheads, they've heard about these shows. If there was one album that someone should go and listen to for the first Grateful Dead experience, which one should it be?
Well, I say talk about in the book in a way. I mean, if you're into songs, Working Man's Dead or American Beauty will blow your mind. There's just such great songs. If you're a jam person, you're probably going to want Live Dead or one of the many, bootlegs. For me, my sweet spot is, if I was going to turn a friend on to it, it would be Europe 72. Because by then they've got the whole package. They've got, the first set is packed with songs, mostly newly written songs. Beautiful 3 or 4 minute, 5 minute songs, 6 minute songs. Well, Dead don't do 3 minute songs, but shorter songs. And yet the second set is full of jazz and space, and then they'll come back to songs. And to me, you get the whole, and no show is under 3 hours. It's really, so I'd say Europe 72 is really where a lot of people sort of say, here's something that I can grab onto. So for me, initially, it was Garcia's guitar and the shorter stuff. I was a little weird. I mean, drum solos, really? Not my cup of tea. And then you sort of, you become sort of immersed and you see sort of the value of it. So that's really where I would start. Europe 72. But for me, my sweet spot is 73, 74, as I say in the book. That's really when it gets as jazzy. You listen to some of the stuff Miles is doing in 74, and it's, obviously it's out there, but you listen to a second set from the Dead show, some of those Dark Stars or other ones, or playing in the bands. I mean, they are completely playing free. They're unscripted, which is why sometimes they're a disaster. They don't go anywhere, But it's like traveling on a map. You might get lost, but you also might avoid, the highway in some interesting places, and that's why people like me, have a bunch of shows from the same period, because this show's got this, or this show's got that, or that night, I've got a couple shows where, they're really in the atmosphere, they're really spacey stuff, and then you can hear Weir in your headphone trying to lure them back into a song, Big River, El Paso, and Garcia's, he won't have anything to do with it. I'm going to stay up here, and then Weir will hit it again to Sugar Magnolia, and you're like, no, I'm not going. I mean, that's very real to me, and that's the antithesis again of a lot of our culture, where it is very, ordained, preordained. So, sorry, I lost you there. You still there? Okay, good.
Yeah, you're still here. You're still here. Ray, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Pleasure.
You can't see it on the screen, but
hold it against yourself. Hold it against your chest. There you go. Look at you.
I can't see you guys. I hope you're holding it up. Yeah.
Oh, we're holding it up. All the years combined. Our guest has been Ray Robertson, the Grateful Dead, in 50 shows. Please go get this book at your local bookstore. If they don't have it, tell them to order it for you. Fantastic read, especially if you're a Grateful Dead fan. And if you're a music fan, pick this up. Pick this up for yourself. Pick up another one for your friend.
It's Christmas
Ray,
season,
thank you so much.
But thanks for having me, guys.